Are you a champion of change? Oh, I'm sure your organization's trying to transform its culture to be more inclusive and sensitive to diversity, but how's that going for you? Let's have ourselves a pocket sized pep talk and pull up a chair because we're going to be talking with an author who is a true pioneer in diversity.
A Pocket Sized Pep Talk, the podcast that can help energize your business and your life with a quick, inspiring message. Now, here's your host, Rob Jallis.
Today's guest, Fred Miller, was the OD Network's youngest Lifetime Achievement Award recipient and received the Forum on Workplace Inclusion's Wind of Change Award. Co-author of 4 books and numerous articles, he's a past member of the board of directors of ATD, OD Network, and Ben & Jerry's Homemade Inc. He currently serves on the board of Day & Zimmerman. Now, I've seen him at a few author retreats, and although he tried to get away, I finally pinned him down for an interview. So welcome to the show, Fred. It's good to finally be able to chat with you.
Thank you, Rob. I'm really glad to be here, and I've appreciated all of our conversations and all of our laughing together.
and we have had some good laughs together. Okay, so let's mix it up a little bit with you. I've got 2 directions I want to go into. I want to start with the book, but then I want to just talk about you, Fred Miller. So let's jump into Change Champions, and titles to me are very revealing. So the Change Champions, just tell me what that title and what that book's focused on.
Yeah, and it really is a book about dialogic OD, which is a concept that is being talked about a lot these days. Jarvis Bush and Barb Marshak are leading that charge and brought up the concept. And it's really about how do we make our cultures change and how do we make them faster? How do we make it more inclusive? How do we make sure we're getting all the voices in the room? And how do we make sure that we have the organization moving in a direction that's going to work for the people as well as working for the organization?
Got it. And there are plenty of books out there, and there are other different approaches and things like that. As a sales trainer, I get this question all the time. Well, you've got this process. What makes your process different, or how have you tweaked it? So, what makes this different from some of the other approaches that are out there?
Well, historically, change has happened top down in organizations. The leaders get together, they go in a conference room, go on a retreat, come back, have this brilliant idea, and try to implement the organization. And then the rest of the work is trying to get buy-in. But also, they don't see it all anymore. Maybe in the old days, many years ago, leaders had a good view of everything that was going on, but nobody has that view anymore. Nobody knows it all anymore. Plus, there's a lot of unknowns and unknowables out there. So the real challenge is how do we get the best thinking of our combined wisdom of the people of the organization and collectively come up with what's best for the organization? Not this group or that group, but all of us together doing it. And so that really starts making a very different process than historically. So it's not top down. It's not just saying to people in the organization, what do you think, and just do it. It's the collective wisdom of the organization coming together. And through that collective wisdom, really figuring out what's the best course of action in a world of change where things are changing all the time. Nobody has all the answers. But what we can do is bring our best wisdom to it, talk to outside resources as we can, and then most change fail because people aren't invested in it. Somebody wants to change me.
Yeah.
I'm not sure I want you to change me, but if I come up with the ideas for my own change, and you come up with ideas for your change, and we bring those together as what we can do for the culture and the organization overall, then we have ourselves positioned to have people committed to the change. Because I see benefit in it because I helped create it and initiate it in the organization. And that's what the Change Champions do. And that's what the dialogical approach says, is really to engage the organization in the transformation process.
Got it. We're on to a topic that to me, I've always wanted to write a book, Fred, called It Looked Good on Paper. Okay. Because there's so many things that we kind of work. So obviously this not only looks good on paper, this is the right thing on paper, but I've got to believe that there's pushback. And if you don't mind me kind of crowbarring me, the sales guy, in with you, there's almost an element of selling, it feels like, that goes on to kind of make it their idea. Is that, do you talk about that in the book?
We do, but I think that the thing right now is I work with lots of leaders. I've been doing this work for 40 some years. Wow. And I think there's never been a time like now where leaders know they don't know all the answers. There's never been a time like now where changes is happening. So this is the fun of Troy, New York, going across the sky as you see my shadow behind me. And so leaders are and have to be in a learning mode. They got to be in an inclusive mode. It's not anymore that one person has all the answers. So it's a different time. And that commitment that they need from people only happens by people being included in the process.
Right, right. Can you give me some examples of how Change Champions has had an impact, on an organization or a corporation?
Sure. And I would start even a minute before that, which is really organizations realizing that people count, that we're not in the industrial revolution anymore, in the post-industrial revolution, and we're not where people were hands and feet, and this was your job, move this from here, put it over there, shut up, do your job. Right. We actually did work with Total Motor Sales, and we went to the plant where they first let the person pull the cord and stop the production line. It was an incredible thing to see and experience, because that was the first time to say, I want you to think. I want you to bring your wisdom to the process. I don't want you just passing something and not thinking about it, because that's the way it was. Let it go down the line. Don't stop it in the process. So we have organizations doing that. So organization was having a lot of errors in what they were doing. And so they got together, they talked about it, they brought people's voices together and figured out how to solve that problem. And so the errors went from, X to minus X in a matter of months. Or another organization where it was a manufacturing organization in the pharmaceutical industry, and there was a problem in one of the valves. They were getting a substance in it that was not right or appropriate. And for a while, all the leaders would just go into the conference room and try to sort it out. And they would end up working over the holidays and all that stuff. And then finally, they asked one of the workers, what do you think? He said, I was wondering when you were going to ask me. It's because we do this in the process back here. It creates that in the process here.
Right.
The wisdom that's in the organization that's not being tapped. I always laugh about a time when many years ago, we were doing work with a major corporation and we were interviewing people, and we had this woman coming in for an interview, and she came in with a little book. And we said, you're bringing a book and like a diary? Why are you bringing that here? She said, I've been saving every idea I've had for about 15 years. Nobody's ever asked me. You're the first people to ask me. And here are all the ideas. That's normal. That's what happened in many organizations. Shut up, do your job. I don't want to hear what you have to say. And that made the difference. We're working with a manufacturing facility in the UK. And the plant was not doing well. In fact, it was on the list of plants that were going to close. And we started doing this work similar to the Change Champions there and got people involved. And the plant turned around. Their safety record improved, their defects decreased, their contributions and new ideas accelerated. And a plant that was going to close, it was on the list, is open and still open like 20 years later because it added value, because people got involved, and that involvement resulted in thinking that could not have been there if you just had one group trying to solve the problem.
Right. And you're basically, working with a bunch of subject matter experts. We want to hear from them. It's funny. I don't know if you ever saw this study. It was done some years ago where they had babies and they were showing them a series of pictures. And their babies were very happy to see these wonderful pictures. And when they took the pictures away, the babies weren't happy. But you know what made them even more angry, Fred? Because the babies had the ability to control the pictures they were seeing. When they took control away and had them come up randomly and removed their control, the babies were 3 times more upset. And I really thought, as I was watching that, how honest is that when you look at a 2-year-old, a 1.5-year-old, and you see the frustration double or triple by removing control. Yeah.
Participation makes all the difference.
Right.
Where people can bring their brilliance if you let them bring it. And they can't bring it if you make it difficult for them. or you don't listen to them. I mean, one of the things I think that's been critical for leaders in recent years, I remember Thomas Peters. He wrote In Search of Excellence, and
Yeah,
I've always loved him.
me too.
And he talked about, in Search of Excellence, what we found out, the secret to a great organization, the secret, he would yell when he talked. The secret was they listened to their people. He said, all the research, all the data, all the stuff that's out there that talks about it, they listen to their people. I think we're learning and relearning that lesson over and over again. I think more organizations are doing that. We have more leaders going out and doing listening tours inside of their organizations. We have a lot of processes now where we want to hear the voices. Now it's hear the voices and then do something with those voices. You don't have to do everything the voices have said, but there's a lot of wisdom in those voices. How do we tap that wisdom for the betterment of the organization?
Yeah. I'm glad you brought up Tom Peters too. He was an inspiration to me when I was in my 20s, working for Xerox. We actually had a Tom Peters video where he was tracking different companies. And I remember he was talking about the banks and he said, shouting Tom Peters, God forbid they should ever be open when the customer's actually around. Because that's when we used to talk about bankers' hours, right? And it's funny, one bank changed and then they all began to change, right? So, okay. Well,
sometimes it's a simple thing. Sometimes it's the obvious things, but we're in a rut. We're in a way of looking at things and thinking of things. And we think the way we're doing it is the way to do it. And that's why the change champions are so important, because their whole process is dialogue. Let's talk to the people in the organization. Let's look at our current frame or paradigm in the organization. And let's see if that frame is working for us, or can we frame the organization differently? Frame the organization in a way that says, hey, the real wisdom's at the top of the organization. Or have a frame in the organization that says, I was with a leader once, a couple of years ago now, and he said, when we bring new people in this organization, I don't think they should talk for the first 2 years. They should just listen to what's going on. And everybody in the room went, oh my goodness. But he was senior leader of an organization.
Right.
That was a frame. That was a frame that he carried. And the organization needed to help him see that frame was not the frame that was going to have the organization have the success that he wanted it to have.
That's amazing. That's amazing. Well, to me, there's talking about it and there's doing it. So, all right, let's say I'm putting a senior leader right in front of you right now. And you're going to be talking about implementing change champions. Cherry pick me 2 or 3 of the most important things that leader would have to be willing to do.
I mean, I think it starts with what we've been talking about. Listen to your people.
Okay.
You got to listen to your people and go out there and hear their voices and let them. I think not be afraid of a process of change where you don't know every step and everything's going to happen. I think leaders have been trained many that you should know everything. Don't do anything unless you know where it's going to come out. Change doesn't work that way. Life doesn't work that way.
Right.
Things evolve. Things move around. Things adjust. You have to adjust to things. So there's something about some degree of comfort you got to have with not knowing all the answers. The thing I've been saying to a lot of leaders I work with recently is you got to change first. A lot of times leaders get up in the front and say, okay, I need y'all to be different. I need y'all to do this. I need you to do that. And the leader doesn't act like there's anything that she or he needs to do differently. And so really that leader saying, and here's some ways that I'm going to change. Sometimes I'm just going to come around and talk to people informally, and you have to come in my conference room, my office to see you. I, as a leader, am going to come into meetings and not run the meetings. I'm going to just join the group and be part of it. I, as a leader, will be your biggest supporter as you're going forward. Servant leadership. Right. I want to be a servant leader. I'm not going to be out there in front. I'm going to be with you in the process. I, as a leader, I'm going to tell you what's going on. I'm going to be as honest with you as I can be. I mean, whatever those things are. Sometimes they're small, as small as when I see you walking down the hall, I'm going to speak to you. I'm not going to act like I'm so important I don't have time to speak to the people in the organization. I was working at a plant one time, and the plant manager leader, every Friday at the end of the week, there were doors that everybody had to go out. He would stand at the door on that Friday and say, thanks for your work this week. Appreciate what you did. How Jill or John or Joe, Bob, thank you for what you did. Thank you, Mary. Appreciate it. Good job on that project. That's what people need. There's not enough appreciations in this world. There's not enough thank yous in this world. And a good leader, the leaders that we need today, being good, saying thank you, giving appreciation is important. And again, to come back to your question, and show the change. Show a change. Show something that you're going to do. It can be as small as hellos, and can be big as I'm no longer going to be the first one that talks in every meeting.
Right.
Whatever that is, that helps to be different. And I think the last thing I would say is don't let your fears stop the process. Just don't let your fears of the unknown, don't let your fears of experimenting something different, don't let that hold back the process. Yes, if something's threatening the well-being of the organization or the bottom line of the organization, of course, speak up and raise your hand. But just because you're uncomfortable, a lot of leaders we work with are introverts. And, one of the things we talk about a lot in Kaleel Jamison Consulting Group is saying hello is the first step to people feeling included. Mm-hmm. And there are a lot of leaders who like to look at their shoes when they're walking down the hallway versus at the people. Once somebody gave a story of getting in the elevator with a senior leader. And the senior leader, was thinking about something, but the person wanted to say hello. So they got their courage up and they said, "Hi, I'm so-and-so, da, da, da." Person say, "Don't you see I'm thinking?" Can you imagine how that went around the organization to say, don't bother? What's the message you want to give? Yeah, leaders are thinking all the time, hopefully, and they're saying in the elevator. What would it take to say, thank you, and what's your name, and glad to meet you, and thanks for working for this thing, and then go back to thinking.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's not big, but it's a mindset, it's a frame that a lot of leaders have carried historically. I think it's changing, so I don't want to take today's leaders like this, but there are things that leaders are still doing. The open door policy when the door's not really open. I have an open door policy, but if anybody goes in there, bless you. Right. Who knows what's going to happen as a result of that? So I think things are shifting. I know things are shifting, and they got to shift faster. One of my big things is say, that's great. What pandemic COVID did for us is say, do those things faster. We were already going to move out of the 5-day work week. That was going to happen eventually. Maybe 10 years from now, 15 years from now, it's happening faster. Leaders were already going to eventually start talking to their people more. COVID said, hey, if you want me in this office, you got to give me some purpose for being here. I'm not just going to come in and sit at a desk when I can do the same work at my home. Why should I be here? So organizations talk about collaboration days. They're talking about come back to the office and we'll spend all the day interacting in meetings. We're not going to be on our screens talking to the person in the office next to us or the cubicle next to us. We're going to have collaboration there. We're going to have days when we come and we start creating that community. Because that's one of my worries these days. If everybody's working from home, I don't know how you get the glue that's necessary for an organization to be high performing. You can be okay, but you're not going to be of the highest performing. And so we got to periodically have people come together. Maybe it's once a year. Maybe it's once every other year. I'm not saying it's got to be frequently, but you can't. Human beings are social animals. Right. I love seeing you on this medium, and it's great, but it's not the same as when you and I were together, 2 months ago in California. It's a different whole experience. So we can have both. It's both. We're going to do both. But we got to create those opportunities for people to come together so we can be real, literally real with each other and have the spontaneity that results from human interaction.
Right. Well, and particularly when we're talking about putting an idea out there, because, now you're talking to me as a seminar leader, and I don't want people getting together every 3 years. I'm noticing the formula that's being followed in 2023 for me is, and I've got a number of companies who are doing the exact same thing, and I didn't bring it up, Fred. They're bringing those groups together to train them, to teach them, to build a process, something repeatable and predictable. For me, a lot of times it's selling. It could be selling or marketing. Sure. But then we go back and I've got 2 different organizations that want 25 virtual follow-ups. Mm-hmm. Now, but we've got the mind share of the individual. Right. Now we're going to implement what we talked about, but it's hard to get the mind share on a screen. It's hard to feel that, Once we get it, then we can nurture it and control it, perhaps on screen. But I'm noticing that.
And the same thing about culture. Once we come together and we can kind of create the culture, then we can go to the screen and play it out, manifest it, enhance it in the process. But we need, because culture takes trust.
Right.
This is not the medium to build trust.
Right.
Communicate information, share information. There's a lot of things we can do here that are wonderful. We can even co-create here.
Right.
But that doesn't guarantee trust as human beings being together. Now, it doesn't mean no trust can be created this way, but the degree of trust you need for the highest level of performance, we're seeing a lot of sports teams play right now. Suppose they only did Zoom until the game happened. You're not going to have the level of success. You're just not.
Right. Yeah. Fred, it's interesting. If you go into a second edition, at least visually, I see almost like we plant the garden together and then we maintain the garden virtually in a sense, but I can't plant it virtually. And planting takes a lot of work. Not that implementing doesn't, but there's a maintenance almost to implementation. But I can't get somebody to believe through a screen. If I can get them to believe, then I can support that belief. You said a bunch of things. I just want to unpack a few things if I could. First of all, I'll tell you, I'm going to throw a story back at you because I am a firm believer, and I believe it was Demings that always believed training should come from the top down, not the bottom up. And I remembered when I was at Xerox, David Kearns was our CEO, and Xerox was trying to battle back because we were getting hammered. Our patents had come up, and Xerox was leaning back going, well, everyone's going to buy Xerox. Well, no, they're not. The Japanese are making really nice equipment, and selling name wasn't working. So Kearns decided, well, we're going to embrace quality. And we took it very seriously. And one of the things that David Kearns, the CEO of Xerox, said, you go find me, and every time you see me, I will have my laminated card that supports this process. So I told this story a few months ago, but I saw him running. I worked at the training center in Leesburg, Virginia. So I'm running, and I thought, yeah, I'm going to do it. And so I pulled over and waited for him to run up, and I ran next to him. I said, hi, Mr. Kearns, Rob Jollis, it's really a pleasure to meet you. Very warm. And I said, I'm just curious. Got your card with you? He reached into his pocket, and there it was. He was running with the laminated card. And guess what? 100,000 people embraced leadership through quality, problem solving, quality improvement, because it came from the top down. They walked the walk, and the grunts weren't trained and told, go do that, but don't let it get in the way. That which can happen. Let's put it that way. I think we've both seen a little of that. And
he didn't say to you, I'm running, don't talk to me.
No, he did not.
Right?
He did not.
You want to jog with me? We can talk for a few minutes,
Yeah.
But that's authenticity. That's believing it. It's not coming from on high and eat it out to the organization. It's believing in what you're saying. It's listening to people. It's joining them in the process of change.
Yep. My dad had a saying when it came to leadership. He used to say it all the time. He said, because I was trying to find my leadership way. And he said, just remember, it's never go on and do it. It's come on, let's do it. And he would repeat that over. And it was like a mantra of his. And, at first it fell on my kind of deaf ears. I was trying to understand it. But as I got a little older, I went, there is a lot of wisdom in just remembering that. Don't go on and do it. Come on, let's do it. All right. Can we get that? I'm assuming we can get that book at Amazon. Of course we can, because I saw it, but I just want you to remind us, yes, we can, right?
Yes, we can. Amazon and other places, but Amazon's a good place to go for change champions.
Perfect.
Fred Miller, Monica Biggs, and Judith Katz.
Yes. And I was on that site looking it over myself. It's looking good. Nice thing about my audience is, and they know this because I tell them every time, Fred, you can be quiet for a moment. My audience doesn't just buy books. They write reviews on books because it's very important to authors. That algorithm is for real at Amazon. So grab that book, Change Champions, and you get extra credit when you write a nice review. There it is. Fred's showing it right now. I'm looking at it. It's looking good. It's looking good. All right, let's shift. We're coming down the home stretch, but I want to talk about you a little bit, and maybe we can kind of take that bridge over, because rarely do we find a book. The book finds us. So tell me kind of why this book for you? Why did this, I'm assuming you didn't get hit on the head by a coconut. Something made you say, I want to write this book, you and Judith. Tell me about that.
Yeah. We've been doing this work around change champions and groups for years.
Right.
And we wanted to spread the word. We wanted
Right.
more people to understand it. I mean, one of the people who reviewed the book said consultants usually write a book and tell you kind of here's the headlines and see me if you want more. But in this book, the consultants spell out every detail of how you go about creating change champions and how they bring about change in an organization. And so our work is, our firm was founded by a woman named Kaleel Jamison in 1970. And I remember when I first started working with her, she was like, let's write this article about this, Fred. And I said, if we write the article about it, then they'll know it. And then what it will do? She said, that means we'll have to write another article about what we're learning as a result of putting that one out there. And I feel the same thing about this. Let's tell people everything we know about this and how it works and whatever. And what I hope is that they use it and they make the changes that are necessary for their organization. And again, the changes about how do you enhance your mission and your vision and your strategies of the organization. This is very bottom line focus. What's the culture you need to support that mission and vision in the organization? And if you want the best work from your people, include them.
Right.
That's why Judith Katz and I, many years ago, used that term to talk about corporations. One of the first people to start talking about inclusion as it relates to the corporate setting. Include people and they are more committed. Include people that can bring what I call bring their brains to work time. That's what we need. We're in an incredible transformation right now. I don't think anybody's seen a transformation like this, not in decades or maybe hundreds of years. And we need the wisdom of the crowd. We need the wisdom of the people in the organization. And so Change Champions is really about how do you tap that wisdom? Because none of us is as smart as all of us. And I carry that as a way of thinking about life and thinking about groups and what they can bring to the party.
Right. I gave you my mantra I learned from my dad. I'm telling you, sitting here, Fred, the mantra I'm pulling is from you. One of them is include people and listen to them. That's not getting lost on me today. That's going to go in our show notes as well. Include people and listen. And last thing, I'll move off this, but just so you know, I've never met a salesperson who says I don't listen. But I got to tell you, when I do a workshop, I never ask them if they listen. I never ask them if they ask questions.
Mm-hmm.
I pull a 180. I pull sort of a little tricky exercise and say, here, break out your smartphones, hit the record button, just sell something to somebody. And there is no listening and there are no questions. And after we sink that hook in a little bit deeper and I ask him, what do you respect in people that can lead and communicate? Oh, they're great listeners. They ask questions. Good. Okay, go play your tape back and just count how many questions and let's see how well you were listening.
Mm-hmm.
And, there's an old saying, what we hear, we forget, what we see, we remember, what we do, we learn.
Right.
An exercise, I could make that point in 10 seconds or it takes me about 20 minutes, but you know what? They never forget it. And I tell them, I got plenty more for you. But if you walk out of here and you say, for the rest of my life, my career, with my family, my friends, my business, I'm going to ask questions and I'm going to listen. I'm going to lock in. If you got that out of this program and you commit to the rest of your life, you just went to the best program workshop you're ever going to go to. I'm going to go deeper, but I don't want to bury the lead. It's that important. And I'm hearing that over and over again from you, Fred.
Yeah. And I grew up in the inner city of Philadelphia in the 50s. And, my birth certificate said Negro on it. So, I mean, that meant something. That meant your life was like this. And your limits were there and the boundaries were there. And there was little expectations of you. And I grew up thinking, well, most people are against me, or most people are not wanting to support me or make things difficult for me. And it was breaking out of that world and eventually going to a company called Connecticut General Life Insurance Company that I started meeting different people. Right. And meeting different people broadened my way. I always talk about, when we talk about diversity and leaders in the company and organizations and how good they are with diversity, the ones that are all in there are coming in, talking about diversity, are people who have been outside the United States. People who've been outside the country and been in other countries and been in other cultures. They have a very different view, a more enhanced view of what diversity means, because they're not stuck in our fishbowl.
Right.
The old saying that the fish that discovered water was a flying fish. Those people who get outside the United States and still get some perspective become some of our best champions. about why diversity is important. That you're not just a Black kid from the inner city of Philadelphia, but you're a person who brings their diversity. I love my identity, but my identity comes with a lot of experience that enhances the situation. And my journey has taught me a lot of things. I bring a lot of knowledge, but that's true of everybody. We all bring knowledge. We all bring experience. We all bring things we learned from our backgrounds and growing up that enhances who we are as a person. If the organization taps that, they get more, not less. And instead of trying to keep it down, it's how do we value it and cherish it and let people know, hey, people share what they want to share. You don't have to share everything, but it's okay here to share as much of who you are that's going to be helpful to you being your best self. And that's a lot of what I've learned in the journey about how do we tap the best in people, let them be their best.
Right. Wow. Very powerful. I remember learning when I at Xerox how to run meetings. And one of the things that was a little odd about Xerox was the manager was not the leader of all our meetings. We rotated our leaders. We rotated our scribes. We rotated our timekeepers. We even had a roll call process guide that sort of took a backseat to the meeting. It was just making sure that people were included and that we didn't have a few people that were talking a little too much or a couple of introverts that were getting away from us, or a manager who wasn't a leader for that day who might be leading a little too much. We had a process of somebody just watching the meeting. And I have to tell you, it was brilliant. It worked really well. And it developed a lot of leaders because the old formula is, well, the manager will lead every meeting. Well, what about the rest of us? When do we get a chance to put on the pads and try this ourselves a little bit?
Right on.
Yeah.
Right on.
All right.
Allow the manager to sit back and listen and hear.
Right.
It's hard to lead and listen at the same time. It's an art, and some people can do it. But a lot of people do better if they can listen to things, reflect on it, and then be able to participate.
Yeah. I was just doing some role plays last week, and I've always put them in groups of 3. I got a seller, a buyer, and an observer. And when my numbers don't work out in 3s, I just have a seller and a buyer. And everybody goes, well, that must be easy. I go, you're missing one thing. The observer gets to step out of both roles. And it's astonishing that it's always the observers that come back and go, now I hear what you were talking about. Now I see what you mean. The seller is focused on these new tactics that we're learning. The buyer's trying to come off their script, trying to help them or not hurt them. But the observer is the only one that's the flying fish you were talking about. That's outside the tank and is going, oh, that question would resonate, or that one would not make me feel very good. I was surprised at that reaction.
Yeah, I hear that. And most people in organizations have been put in the role of observer. Yeah. So that means there's a ton of wisdom in the organization that's not being tapped. Right. And so that person who came into our interview with her notes from 10 years, that was wisdom in there. Was everything she said in there right? Who knows? But I bet you there were some great things inside of there.
Yeah. You're right. One of the reasons why we encouraged, and I don't want to just label people introverts, but the people that just aren't as comfortable talking in a meeting. They might be very comfortable talking somewhere else. For the exact same reason you said, Fred, we were out to try and balance that feedback, that involvement, because it's the ones that were sitting back, that usually sit back in the meetings, that have been the observers. And they're not as emotionally tied. They're not trying to sell an idea here or there. They've actually got both sides of the coin there that they're looking at. And if you can include them, you have people that have been looking at things without any emotional involvement. And they are a wealth of information. But you have to go get them. You have to make it easy. You have to give them a mechanism to get in. Because if you're waiting for their hand to go up and for them to push their way in, it won't happen.
Yeah, we were with a client recently. It was a lawyer who led the law department, and he talked about this culture is fine. You just got to be, you got to push. You got to just be aggressive, and da. And one of the women in the group, she was Asian, said, "That's not how I want to interact with people." And he said, "Well, we can teach you how to do it." She said, No, that's not how I want to interact with people. And she said, "I can be effective. And I can accomplish everything, But if that's a behavior that's necessary to be successful here, that's not going to work for me. And he was like astounded, like, whoa, somebody doesn't think that's the behavior.
Right.
And so that's what you learn by interacting with others. You're not going to have that conversation necessarily on the computer screen, right? But if we're in person, we can learn about some of those things. If we're in person, we can hear the other person. We're in person, I can sit back a little bit and listen to what I can learn from the other people in the room. There's wisdom in every person.
Yeah.
And the job
Right.
of teammates and of leaders is to create the forum where that wisdom can come out.
Right.
For the betterment of the organization.
Right. And I think we're on the same page here. It's interesting. I've never actually articulated this, but sometimes the most wisdom is from the ones those observers, those ones that have been sitting back, the ones that you're not even looking to because they don't normally talk in the meeting. They may have the best information sitting there. We just have to remember to go get it. I've got the sense that Kaleel is one of those mentors to you, a very important person in your life. Give me one or two others that really are a major part of your life.
So my business partner of 30 years, Judith Katz, who co-wrote the book with me, has been just, I call it the best business partner in the world. And there aren't many 30-year business partnerships. And so it speaks a lot to her and who she is. She did what I call a boomer retirement a couple of years ago, which means she doesn't do any of the stuff she didn't like. And she only does the stuff that she really wants to do now. And mainly that's writing books, which we just did, and writing articles, which we're working on more articles. So she's been just a dear, dear friend. She's been somebody I could trust, somebody that I could make mistakes in front of and learn from. So that's been it was a great, great business partnership. And it continues. She's just retired, but we're continuing it. And then the last person I'll mention for brevity of time is my mother, who was the one who, as I was an inner city Negro coming up in Philadelphia, had to go to fight with, guidance counselors who wanted to put me in the trade classes versus the academic classes. Guidance counselors said, he'll never go to college. He'll never, da-da-da-da. She was the one, so she got to be the head of the PTA, the Parents Teacher Association, so she can make sure that things were happening in that school that was right for others and also right for her son. She lived to 105. 105. Wow. So, and she had, tons of wisdom and insight that really, obviously stayed to me to this day and will stay with me forever, that I pass on to my children. But she knew that if you didn't put effort forward, you couldn't guarantee you were going to get a result that was going to be pleasing to you. And so she was willing to invest, whether it was working as a poll worker or being in the PTA or whatever it was, and so that she could make the community and herself and her family better. And so she's somebody obviously who is dear.
Well, Fred, she helped raise and teach one heck of a great son. So hats off to your mom. And 105, that's terrific. That's one heck of a life.
She had her wits together very, very well. She was still doing her own bills all the way through her 90s.
Wow. Well, that's terrific. That was going to be my last question, but I just have a tiny question. How do people get a hold of you?
So, Fred 411 at kjcg.com. Fred 411 at kjcg.com. Kaleel Jamison Consulting Group.
Perfect. And you have an Amazon authors page?
Yes.
Good. All right. So we know we can find you on Amazon.
Yes.
And we're going to go looking for that book as well. Change Champions. And I am so glad we were able to do this finally. Just terrific. I'm so grateful you were able to spend some time and talk. And we're going to be doing this when we don't have the camera on as well. But Fred, just really just terrific. I learned a lot, and I'm just grateful you were able to spend some time with us.
And I want to thank you for the work that you do, and I want to thank you for the wisdom that you bring to situations and the humor you bring to situations. And I want to thank you for just being a person out there trying to make the world better and sharing your wisdom. So thank you very much, and thanks for having me here.
Means a great deal. Okay, fellow Barrett Kohler author, you take care. And folks, we'll do it again as well as we can next time. Until then, stay safe.
Thanks so much for listening. If you enjoyed today's show, please rate and recommend it on iTunes, Outcast, or wherever you get your podcasts. You You can also get more information on this show and Rob at jollis.com.